Okay. So I'm not sure where I departed, but I'll just repeat some of this stuff. So there are the two problems. We've seen them, the pride and the selfishness. These are the things that we want to remove from our children, but not we want to, but we want to help them to remove these two issues themselves. Because as we have seen before, the spirit is not something that can be it can be influenced from outside, but it cannot be forced from the outside. The spirit governs itself from the inside, and only when the individual's coming to a point of conviction that something is true, then they will take the action. And this is what we want to educate our children to see, that they have an innate error, a problem in themselves. And what does it mean to be proud? What is pride? Pride equals to being spiritually independent, to believing that I'm spiritually independent, when in reality, I can never be spiritually independent. I orient or actually guide myself after myself. I am my own standard. And we see this every day in life. Every human being in the world thinks this. I don't have to give an account to anybody for what I do. And that this is also the spirit of the world. So these 3 points here make up this terrible problem that we have: pride. Selfishness, I am alive for myself and I live out of myself for myself, pretty much. So I live out of myself here, and then I live for myself here. All people around me are there also for me, not just for themselves, but I am not satisfied with just myself. I need to use others, and others have to satisfy my needs. It's not me who needs to go and look for how to satisfy my needs, but others are responsible to make me feel good, to make me feel happy, to make me feel loved. So all these things come out of our heart of selfishness. And our children are born with these two character traits. So out of that I am God identity, pride and selfishness come. And true education's purpose is to help the child remove these two problems, as we said before. Now, if these are the two pillars of evil, the two pillars of our hearts, what are really the two pillars of education? And we have seen that the law of life consists of the two major laws, because God gave the two tablets, right? One tablet had to do with God and our relationship to him. And as we've seen before, it is where we take from. And that first law says that nothing can exist or function by itself. And we're talking here both physical and spiritual realms. And the second law, the second tablet, is all to do with our neighbor. And the law says that nothing was made for itself. There is no self-purpose. So Jesus says the law is love God with all your mind, with all your being, with everything that is in you, and your neighbor as yourself. So I make God my source here, and then I pass that which I take from God unto my neighbor, and therefore I fulfill the law. But we will see that if we don't do this, then we cannot fulfill the law. And if we're taking from the wrong place, which then is feeding this, the pride and the selfishness. So from an education perspective, we have the basic rules, which we'll quickly recap in a minute. Rules that should be pretty much a lifetime kind of span for them. Like, we learn to obey these rules in childhood, and then we take these rules with us all our lives, and therefore the entire family obeys these basic rules. So the rules are not just for the children, the rules will be for mom and dad, aunts and uncles, and grandma and grandpa, and everybody that comes into the home. They will obey and observe these rules because they are eternal rules. And then we have the tasks that we give our children, and we also, as grown-ups, we have tasks to do every day. So the basic unchangeable rules would be the ones that we were talking about. And some of these, I mean, there's more than what I've listed here, but these are the major ones that everyone should take heed of and teach their children to take heed of. So all things have their time. And we've seen the examples as to when things don't have their time, there is chaos in the home. All things have their place. Same thing. Everything has to have their certain place, and we are not mixing things with other things, and therefore everything is ordered, and we know where to take certain items from their place, and they need to go back there after we use them. All things have their purpose, or they have a task that they have to fulfill. If you can't find a purpose for a thing in your home, chuck it out. There is no point in holding on to it. All things have their measure or size. Time itself has the measure, and everything has a given size. Then, from a tasks perspective, we need to have a daily plan and a weekly plan. Every day we have something in particular to do, and the children know, and mum knows, and dad knows, and we go through our plan, through our timetable. We make it ahead of time. We discuss it in the business meeting in the morning with the family worship. We discussed all this last time. The weekly plan as well needs to be the same every week. On Monday, we do cooking. On Tuesday or on Sunday, we do the washing. On Monday, we do the cooking. On Tuesday, we do the gardening. On Wednesday, we do the cleaning. Then on Thursday, we do more cooking. On Friday, we prepare for Sabbath. So there's always a very clear, repeatable plan for the week. And the children know that this is the day that I do this, and this is the time that I do this. So they need to have a very stringent timetable. We need to give the children a task from one end to the other. We never use the children as our servants. Oh, you just go and put out the trash. Well, yes, the putting out of the trash is part of that entire process, but it's not just that we get him to do, or Carmen, help mum. No, mom is the teacher. Mom does not need help. Mom teaches the child and teaches the child for a certain amount of time. And when that time elapsed, the child is allowed to do the task end to end on by itself, by themselves. And then mom supervises and watches. Mom does not even intervene, because it's best to allow children to show what they have learned. So we allow them to do a task from end to end. Okay, we always give higher tasks than the child expects, because that way we can stop that pride. When a child does something that they know exactly how to do, then there's no challenge there. They can become very proud as to how well they can do certain things. So we need to bring them higher, and we never tell them, do it how I do it, because children are creative and they may have better methods even than we have. So let them exercise their thinking, their creativity. And when they are stuck, we don't jump to tell them, oh, do it this way. We help them to go to God and have a conversation with God. Ask God for help and for direction. And this is how we can knit this relationship with God into the child's daily tasks. Show them that I am also limited. Don't come to me for help when you are stuck. Obviously, when there is an emergency and the child's burning down the house, we will intervene. But for things where they can go away and think about it, we allow the child to think about it, to mull it over with God, and encourage them to go back to their Father in heaven. Okay, at the end of the day, there is a daily evaluation that mum has to do with the child. And when the child is younger, we may choose to do it more than once a day. But usually mum teaches for 3 weeks and then allows the child to do the task that she has been teaching. For instance, with a very young child, teaching them to put away all the toys that they played with during the day. And we help them initially. And then time comes when they have to do it by themselves. Then I sit back and observe the child. I make mental notes. I might need to, when the child is older and the task is more complicated, or other children are present, and I observe how they interact, I make mental notes of the child's reaction. I make maybe even written notes, and then we'll discuss with them at the end of the day. So today you forgot to put your toys away. Why do you think that happened? And the child will bring an excuse, because they are very clever at that. And they might say, well, I just forgot to do that. Well, then what do you think we should do to help you next time remember? So we don't just go and put it away for them. We don't go off and manipulate them, in the sense that you can't come in and have dinner unless you put your toys away. That is not constructive. That is not what will help the child. We have to give a consequence that will possibly be painful. Always needs, when I'm not serving in the way that God wants me to serve. So, can you hear me? I'm just getting messages that my
Yes,
connection is unstable.
it
Okay,
is.
thank you. Okay. So when all these things, these are all each a cog in this little system, and when everything works together, it's a beautiful system that will work hand in hand with each other. So we went through this, the why, the purpose of education is to become free from self-deception and restore self-control and ability to serve. The what is the content, and that is the law of life, the human nature, the thought process, the plan of salvation. These are the subjects and the content of education at home. Even if the child goes to school, these subjects must be part of your education list at home. If the child is homeschooled, again, these, apart from the science and the maths and the writing and the reading and whatever you are doing with your child, you have to teach them these subjects. And the how is the method, and it has to be God's method, which involves divine love, but divine love that is lived by the parent, by the mother in particular, because it is the mother's role to be teaching the child, and applied individually for each child. So you can't have any of these just as a blanket thing for everybody, but it has to be tailored. And you as a mother will know your child the best, because remember, there is an umbilical cord on a spiritual level, which the child is linked to the mother by. Okay, we've seen this before, but I think it's very, very important for us to understand what true love is, and to understand that love does never come from us. So love always comes from God, divine love, which is infinite in its goodness, in its patience, in its grace and mercy. So God is love, and divine love only ever comes from God. And we have seen before that divine love gives maximum interest for the other, whereas human love that we believe we have, but really and truly it is not love, but it is an expression of our hopelessness, which will always try to make the other one into the source of my need. And it will always have maximum interest in the other instead of for the other. So when my need is not satisfied by you, because I have so much interest in you, I am ready to eat you alive. I will dominate you. I will force you to do the good, and I will compel you to do the good. And do you recognize yourself as a parent in this? I do. For many years, I was dominating my children, forcing them and compelling them, manipulating them to do the good because it was good. It's good, right? But the method, the love that does not give 100% freedom and 100% respect, which is God's love, divine love, that method does not come from God. The method that compels and forces for good will drive us when the other one rejects the good that I'm trying to force on them, drives us to become indifferent and to become careless about them. And I know that mothers can never be indifferent, but they will try to show that they don't care anymore. And that is not God. God will never be indifferent to us. So God will never force us to do the good, and he will never compel us to do the good. But we do, and out of this forcing and compelling, all the conflicts and the diseases will originate from, because none of us will force our children to do the evil, but we will force them to do good, and that is just as evil can be. So we need to understand this. Again, God is love, and everything that he gives to us and we go to take through the word, through Christ, will return to God as fruit. And his love is infinite. He gives freedom. He gives respect to his creatures. And only God, because of this love, he can be independent, because all this comes from him. So he needs nobody, and he needs nothing of his creation. He does not need us. He doesn't need any of his creation, but he wants us because of his love. And he created us that we may be dependent on him, to come to him and take this love and pass it on to our children, onto our spouses, onto our circle of influence. So, if the rules that we talked about are not being observed, what do we do? And we touched a little bit on the consequences. Now, consequences can come from two angles, and that is, one is from love, and the other one is from the pride and selfish heart, the proud and selfish heart. And I am sure that none of you would want to be here, but we would all want to be under the love side. So love will give consequences to help the child be aware of his error. Love will not give consequences to prove itself, but rather to help the other one. And to help the child not to forget what he did wrong. So, as we had that example with the child that forgot to put his toys away, we give a consequence so he will not forget that he forgot about his toys. God does the same thing with us. If you observe your life, whenever we fell into our pride and selfishness, God will give us a consequence of a stomach pain, or a fever, or something even more serious like a cancer, just to help us look within and look where we are not satisfying our needs from him. Because nothing comes causeless. Everything has to have a cause, and then God will give the effect to help us the best way to come out of that cause. And the cause will always be the sinful heart, the incorrect identity of our hearts, and that is, I am God, instead of I am a child of God, who makes God their source. And whenever we give a consequence, we don't give the consequence to hurt the child. Yes, it'll be painful, but we don't take pleasure in that pain. We ourselves are hurt by the consequence, but we know that that consequence will help the child quash that I am God identity, bring them out of that pride and selfish heart, and remember that service is good. Service is something that God created them for, and he gave them the purpose of being helpful to others. So, as we said, it must be therefore painful, because otherwise they won't remember. If the consequence is not painful, what use is it? So it should never be an action that the child has to do. So I cannot say to the child, okay, you didn't do such and such, now go and wash the dishes because of the error you have committed. That is very wrong, because the consequence cannot be something that they should do anyway. We cannot portray these tasks around the home as something negative, because they need to understand the tasks that they have to do around the home have to be done out of pleasure, out of love to others. But if we bring these tasks and make them as punishments, if you like, then how can we teach that they need to love to do these tasks? So a consequence should always be a withdrawal of privileges. And you know your child, and you know what is very dear to them. Maybe it could be their time with certain devices or whatever. Take it away. It has to go down that path where it makes them feel very what should the word be, in pain for it. So sometimes it could be that it needs to be a little smack on the bottom, or whatever you decide with dad, mom and dad decide together. Or sometimes the children, when they are older, they can be involved, but normally God never asks us, what consequence should I give you? God brings the consequence. So the lawgiver cannot only the lawgiver can be the one that gives the consequence. It is not the one that has to obey the law. So, and the treatment has to be, or the consequence have to be, an objective one without personal involvement. So you can't say that, oh, you made me so sad and I am so sad now, and you have brought so much disgrace to the family, or things like that. God never does that. You cannot be involved yourself emotionally as a victim of their actions, because if you are really walking with the Lord and God is your source, you cannot be the victim of your children. Okay. Now, consequences that come from a proud and selfish heart will be punishments that are almost revenges, and that And also on the other end of the spectrum, you will start making compromises with them. And that is a no-no as well. You cannot negotiate with your child. So yes, the compromise would be to create a so-called win-win situation through negotiation. That is not a consequence out of love. God does not negotiate with us. Okay, so God will give the consequence. And yes, we can go to him and ask the Lord to take away the consequence once we repented and understood the situation, and God will take it away. And also the consequence has a finite ending, so it's not going to be a normal thing that happens every day or goes on and on and on. But we don't negotiate about it. If you do this, I'll do this, or whatever. No, that is not correct. Okay, the parent exercises his more powerful position towards the child. So again, I look at the child from above. I have the power, and you do what I say, and I am going to destroy you now because you haven't obeyed me. This is devilish. We don't do this. The parent is just as upset, just as hurting as the child, but the consequence has to be given, and we are feeling with them for their pain, and we will be there always to help them have victory over the problem that they've encountered. So also out of pride and selfishness, it's an act of revenge by the parent when we lose our minds in rage because of, the most precious vase got broken or whatever. It happened to me in the past. I remember clearly my son, I brought my laptop out of my room because he needed to do something on it, and I put it on the kitchen table, and I almost saw that he will knock it over and it'll break, and that's exactly what happened. And I can tell you, I lost it. And poor boy, he was young. He was only 12, I think, Aaron. He broke down and cried so much, and I realized that I was just a ferocious person. But that was just because I knew I didn't trust God. I knew that now it's broken. I could never replace it because I was a single parent. I didn't have the money. I felt hopeless and helpless. Instead of trusting the Lord and being calm and working through with it as to why he was clumsy or whatever. So these things happen, but we ourselves need to come out of our own pride and selfishness in order to help our children to come out of pride and selfishness. Okay. The child should never be forced to act. So we force them to apologize or to pray or to go and pick up their toys. We observe, but and then we discuss with them, but we never force them to do anything that we want them to do. And out of selfishness, the consequence will never be factual or objective, but always personal. And the parents take it as an attack against themselves. So, as I said before, here, this is the opposite of this one. So you have done this and I am so distraught now. You destroyed my reputation. You have taken the family down, whatever. That is not out of love. That is out of my own personal selfishness, of my own insecurities, out of my own issues. And I need to go on my knees and see God about these if I find myself doing this kind of stuff. Okay, we have seen the two types of relationships, and we know that the soul is made up of the spirit and the body, and in the spirit we have the I, the good I, and the evil I, the single I and the evil I. The identity of being a creature in the single I, and God is my source, and I'm binding to that source by taking the information that I receive from God, which are words, which is his word, the Bible. That is my input, and by trust and belief I take the words and I make them my food spiritually. Then I have so this is the first law I take from God. He is my source. And the second law, as I am a channel, I would not hold to myself, but I will pass on to those that are outside of me. And that is Lucifer, people and animals. And in that way, I am fulfilling the law, the 10 commandments, the first law and the second law. That way, I live from this relationship up here. I live out of God, and I live with these relationships by giving to them and through my actions towards all these. But the other type of relationship is where I have the evil eye, which we are born with, the evil eye, and my identity is I am God. And therefore, I make people, Lucifer and animals, my source. And I receive lying words that go into my spirit. I am bound to them. And by trust and belief, I take the lies as truth. And therefore, my output goes where? We break the whole entire circuit as to how God has made it to function. And therefore, I live out of these relationships, and I live with which relationships? The same. But then this whole circuit, God cannot be in it because I've made the outside people and my children and my spouse, my parents are my source. Therefore, I cannot have anyone to live with because I'm already living out of them. Therefore, I cannot fulfill the law. If I break the source where I'm taking from, I will also break where I'm giving, because I can't be giving where I'm taking from. But we are so confused that we don't really see it, we don't understand it, and therefore we messed up. But salvation is to come out of this relationship and come back into the true single I. And that is that I have the identity of I am a child of God, and I have spiritual needs from my heart, which is my subconscious, in which I make decisions to take and trust in God and take his love and to depend on God in my spirit. So I will have to depend constantly on the source. And if I make God my source, then I am in the right circuit. I will be taking from the right source. And I've been saying this over and over because it's so important that I understand that God has to be my source and no one else. Okay. And I'm talking here to the parents. So we as parents have to have these relationships sorted out and straight, because we cannot teach this to our children if we ourselves are failing to depend constantly and continuously on God. So when I take love from God, I fulfill the law of life. I have love in my heart, and I can have these relationships outside of me and not here, not inside of me, to make them as sources, so I can then freely pass the love that I take from God, pass to people. And then at the exit, I can give. And for my heart that lives only on gain and loss, giving will become gain and not receiving. Because when giving is my gain, then I know that my body thrives. Remember, there's texts that clearly say it is more blessed to give than to receive. And when we give, this is when healing in my body occurs. Okay. And I am independent here. How beautiful it is to be independent of our children, of our spouses, of our relationships, but only dependent on God. And when I'm saying independent, spiritually, I mean, I don't need my spouse to act in a certain way so that I can love them. I don't need my children to act in a certain way so that I can love them. I love them because they are here and not here, and I take from God and I pass the love on regardless of how they behave towards me. Easily done? No. But when I'm in this dependency, God is the one that will help me to do this. It is Jesus's life that I can take and live out of. It is the belief, the faith, the trust in my subconscious that Christ in me can do this. Okay. And the giving will be a gain to me, a gain to my spirit, and a gain to my body. However, the bad news is that our children, and even us, because none of us have attained yet this complete identity of I am a child of God, we are still wallowing in this identity of I am God. And therefore, our pride and selfishness and the law of death are ruling and are kings in our lives very much still. But it doesn't mean that we can't come out of this, because God has given us the tools. God has given us the hope. God has given us the faith, which we can exercise to come under this setting here as parents. So out of the selfish and proud heart, I will always give first in order to receive, and I consider receiving a gain. Okay, so it's upside down, is the other way around, and it is always painful when this happens, because this brings dependence on our outside relationships and not dependence on God. And therefore, we find ourselves in a lot of conflict. We find ourselves in a lot of disease and a lot of misery. Okay, now the interaction between need and error, the problem of the child. So what is the problem of the child? We've seen, but our children have needs, and these needs are good needs. They are needs for love, and they are needs for respect. Children have a need to be respected, and parents these days do not respect their children. They have a need for freedom. They have a need for safety. They have a need for justice and harmony and well-being, and to be recognized and to be appreciated and to have peace. These things are not bad needs. God put them into our spirit. But now, how are these needs used and fulfilled by our children? Because all of them, look at them, how beautiful they are. They have this evil eye when they are born. From the minute that they sound out that first cry, and we see them, but even from the minute of conception, that evil eye is passed down into our children. And they have the lie in them, in their hearts, in the subconscious. And that lie tells them that their identity is, I am God. And therefore they expect to receive all these needs from others, and in particular from parents. There are so many people that I have met in my past, and also in my practice, also in my family. Also, I have done it many times, to say that, oh, you know, my parents never appreciated me, or I never had freedom in my home, or I never felt loved in my home. So our children have these needs, and yes, we as mothers, we as parents are the ones that provide them with these needs. But we also need to teach them that we are not the source of these needs, that in reality, I myself go to God to get all of these, and I don't expect these to come from them. I don't expect them to appreciate me. I don't expect them to respect me even. I can't say to my child, oh, the fifth commandment says this, and you have to respect me. That is not godly. Even God doesn't say that to us, but he does show us his love and goodness. And he would not have any interest that we respect him out of fear and terror, but that we respect him out of love and appreciation for what we take from him, what he is able to give us, and that we take from him this love that is infinite, that is perfect, that is fulfilling. So we cannot do that to our children, and to give them any of these in exchange for them giving us back these things, because then we're doing exactly what comes out of this evil eye. I am God, and I expect you to give me, you know, harmony and appreciation and recognition and respect. It is wrong. But the child is born with this idea. So this is exactly what we need to help the child to see, that yes, initially I give these to him, but I also am not the source. I need to take these things from God, pass them on to them, and slowly unbind them from me, so that they can be directly bound to God for these needs, so that they can take their love, their need for freedom, their need for harmony, their need for peace from God directly, and not from their future relationships either, not from their future friends or their future spouses, boyfriends, girlfriends. No, not from mom, not from dad. God is the source. So there is this conflict between the mother and the child, and we spoke about this before. Why this conflict, constant conflict, from birth to death almost, there is this terrible contention between mother and child. It could be manifested in various ways, either through overt conflict or through this constant dependence on each other. And either of those are no good. And why? Because exactly that, we are born with this evil eye, which some of us will never remove. But God is calling us to remove this evil eye and replace it with a single eye, replace it with Christ's heart, with Christ's spirit. So the lie of I am God is in the child, and the lie of I am God is in the mother. And therefore, all this contention happens, and the spiritual dependency happens between the two, as I mentioned before. So if the child's needs are not met, the child will protest. And the expressions of the protests from the child, who doesn't know, a child who has not been trained to know that these needs cannot be met by me as the mother, but that he needs to go to God, he will start to protest, and he will attempt to control the parents because he wants to make them happy and peaceful. So, for instance, a child has a need for harmony and peace in the home, but there is a lot of quarreling. There is a lot of arguments. There is a lot of conflict in the home, and the mom is always sad. The mom, a spirit of prophecy tells us that the mother has to be the sunshine of the home, the person that is representative of love and a softness, of always cheerfulness. Ellen White says, even if you are sick, do not let the child know that you are unwell. Muster up courage in yourself. And how do we muster it in ourselves? We don't have. I have to go to the source of life, to the source of goodness, to God, to help me, to show my child that I am depending constantly on my God, and that he is the one that gives me the strength to be able to be there for him, a sunshine of goodness, a sunshine of cheerfulness and joy, because my God makes me that. If the child doesn't have that, he will try to control the parents, and that control can come up as body pain or disease or refusal to eat, drink, or dress. Have you experienced this in your family? Are your children behaving sometimes this way? Uncontrollable behavior sometimes. And as a parent, we are counseled to never act against the needs of the child. And that is to be unkind or disrespectful or not peaceful, but to actually fulfill the child's needs. However, we also need to teach our children, as I said, to see that those things don't come from us. they come from God. So the crucial question, do parents want to help the child become free from the error that they were born with? And I'm sure that each one of you would long to bring your children out of this error. So parents do need time to think about these things, to plan and to implement, to discuss amongst themselves, to discuss it with God, to go to God every day and ask him, Lord, help me see where I'm failing my child. Where am I being hindered because of my evil eye to bring this child to an understanding of who you are and an understanding of his own demise in his own heart. Help me, show me how to do this. We cannot have those ideas out of ourselves. So do not be shy in coming to Jesus, coming to God and pouring out your heart and asking him to direct you, even when you are facing a situation. When things happen with your child, retract, go to your room, go out in the woods and have a chat to God. There is nothing wrong with doing that. It's worse to actually explode and do the wrong thing and then be devastated that, you know, you would have had an opportunity to go to God and you didn't. So best to think on your feet and come out of the heat, go to God. Should know yourself and how to satisfy your own needs so that you can help your child. And we discussed this quite at length. You need Christ, the Savior, to be able to accomplish the service successfully, the service towards your children. So, yes, there is no magic bullet, but all goodness lies in God, and salvation is of God and is not of us. And we are here just as means of bringing these children into the world. They are not our property. It is very important to understand that each parent was just a means used by God to create these beautiful creatures that our children are. But our children are ultimately God's children. We cannot treat them as our own property, either for good or for bad. Please understand, forcing the good onto our children is just as bad as being evil as evil can be. All right, I've selected a few Spirit of Prophecy passages that encourage us and that talk to us about our sinful nature and also what actually education is to achieve in our children. And I will quickly go through them. It says, to the careless, the indifferent, the unconcerned, those standing on the precipice of ruin, Christ says, open the door of your heart, give me entrance, and I will make you a child of God. I will transform your weak, sinful nature into the divine image, giving it beauty and perfection. Youth Instructor, November 11, 1897. What a beautiful quote. If the rich young ruler had seen by the light of the commandment that he was sinful, if like Paul, he had honored God by obeying the commandments in spirit and in truth, his sinful nature would have been slain by the law, and he would have laid hold of eternal life. Amen. What a sad case the rich young ruler was. That's in Review and Herald, September 11, 1990. The Apostle Paul clearly presents the relation between faith and the law under the new covenant. he says, being justified by faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ. Do we then make void the law through faith? God forbid, yea, we establish the law. For what the law could not do, in that it was weak through the flesh, it could not justify man because of his sinful nature. He could not keep the law. God sending his own Son in the likeness of his sinful flesh, and for sin condemned sin in the flesh, that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, who walk not after the flesh, but after the Spirit. And I think I might have missed some parts of this quote. Anyway, sorry about that. If ye then be risen with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ sitteth on the right hand of God. Set your affection on the things above, not on the things on earth. For ye are dead, and your life is hid in Christ, with Christ in God. Ask yourselves the questions: have I complied with the requirements here laid down by the inspired apostle? Have I evidenced in my life, my death to the world, that my life is hid in Christ, with Christ in God? Am I submerged in Christ? Do I draw sustenance and support from him who has promised to be to me a present help in every time of need? You have a formal religion, but have not a special sense of your weakness, your corruption, and your vileness by nature. Testimonies, Volume 2, page 177, paragraph 1. The true object of education is to restore the image of God in the soul. In the beginning, God created man in his own likeness. He endowed him with noble qualities. His mind was well balanced, and all the powers of his being were harmonious. But the fall and its effects have perverted these gifts. Sin has marred and well nigh obliterated the image of God in man. It was to restore this that the plan of salvation was devised, and a law and a life of probation was granted to man. To bring him back to the perfection in which he was first created is the great object of life, the object that underlies every other. It is the work of parents and teachers in the education of the youth to cooperate with the divine purpose, and in so doing, they are laborers together with God. Councils on Education 63:6. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of all wisdom, and when God is not depended upon, the result of education is only to elevate ungodliness. The reason that the church is weak and indifferent is that there is a want of the grace of God, of the grace of Christ among those who profess the truth for these last days. The same book, page 140. And the most essential, enduring education is that which will develop the nobler qualities, which will encourage a spirit of universal kindliness, leading the youth to think no evil of anyone, lest they shall misjudge motives and misinterpret words and actions. The time devoted to this kind of instruction will yield fruit to everlasting life. Page 202, paragraph 1. And may the Lord help us to bestow this kind of education upon our children and even our grandchildren, even, anybody that comes in contact with us. May we be a flavor and a savor of life unto life. Amen.
Amen.